7,789 feet of tunnel, 11,158 feet of elevation, 6,000 workers over 5 years, 1 million cubic yards of rock removed. These numbers made the Eisenhower Tunnel the highest point on the entire interstate system and one of the most extreme construction projects in American history. But here is the number that almost killed it: 26.5%. That is how much of the mountain could actually support itself. The rest was crushed, fractured rock in fault zones where the mountain was still moving, squeezing inward with enough force to bend steel beams and bankrupt the first contractor. Standard tunneling methods failed. So how do you drill through rock that is actively shifting, and why was going straight through the only option that worked? To understand why engineers were willing to tunnel through geology that was actively trying to collapse, you need to see what was at stake. By the 1950s, Colorado's western slope was economically isolated. The only routes across the Continental Divide were 2 mountain passes that had hit their limits. North to Berthoud Pass on US Route 40, which climbed through more than 50 avalanche paths and tight switchbacks. South to Loveland Pass on US Route 6, which topped out at nearly 12,000 feet and crossed directly through the Seven Sisters avalanche chutes. Both saw regular accidents. Trucks overheated on climbs, lost brakes on descents. Winter storms shut them down for days at a time. The economic impact was crippling. Mining operations sat idle during closures. Ski resorts that could have operated year-round were stuck part-time. Freight haulers were routing cargo through Wyoming and New Mexico to avoid the unreliable crossings. Denver to Vail took over 3 hours. Every winter shutdown cost the state millions in lost commerce. But the stakes went beyond Colorado. When the interstate highway system got approved in 1956, federal planners were mapping transcontinental routes, and the interstate could not just stop at Denver. A reliable, year-round link through the Rockies meant cutting hundreds of miles off cross-country shipping. It meant military logistics could move equipment coast to coast without weather delays. It meant the entire Western economy could grow at the pace the country needed. Colorado kept pushing Washington to extend Interstate 70 through the mountains, even when federal planners said it was too expensive and too extreme. The question was not whether to build it. The question was where. The debate over where to tunnel got heated enough that the state commissioned an independent engineering study. In March 1960, engineer E. Lionel Pavlo submitted his findings after examining 8 possible routes between Empire Junction and Docero. His conclusion was blunt. No surface highway could meet interstate standards. The grades were too steep. The curves were too tight. Winter would shut it down too often. The only way to make Interstate 70 work was to tunnel straight under the Continental Divide. When engineers compared the tunnel routes, the straight creek alignment, which followed the US 6 corridor near Loveland Pass, came out on top. It was nearly 10 miles shorter than routing north through Berthold Pass. 10 miles might not sound like much, but multiply that by every vehicle crossing the Rockies for the next 50 years, and the time and fuel savings across the entire nation justified the enormous cost of drilling through solid rock. There was just one problem. The problem was not just altitude or weather. It was that you had to cross the Continental Divide at a point where solid granite met crushed, unstable fault zones created by the same tectonic forces that lifted the Rockies in the first place. The plan was simple enough. Drill and blast your way through the Continental Divide. Standard approach for the time. Drill holes in the rock face, pack them with explosives, blast away a section, haul out the debris, install steel and concrete supports to hold the ceiling up, then move forward and do it again. Bore a tunnel roughly 50 feet high and 45 feet wide. In stable granite, crews could make steady progress, advancing section by section through the mountain. But the straight creek alignment had a problem. About a quarter of the route passed through the Loveland Pass shear zone, where that stable granite gave way to crushed, fractured rock. In that zone, the standard drill and blast method was not going to work. The geology was too unstable. The mountain was still moving, and nobody had figured out how to tunnel through rock that refused to stay still. Work started on March 15, 1968, with a 3-year timeline. Right away, the mountain had other plans. Early test drilling had predicted 75% stable granite and 25% softer rock. What they actually found flipped that equation. 73.5% needed constant reinforcement or it would collapse. And they were doing all of this at more than 11,000 feet, where engines struggled, workers got tired faster, and winter storms could shut down the access roads without warning. Then they hit the fault zones, and that is when things went sideways. 820 feet of rock where the mountain was actively shifting. This was not rock that just sat there. It pushed inward as they dug. Steel ribs bent. Heavy support beams deformed under the pressure. They brought in a 450-ton shield to protect workers from cave-ins, and it got stuck after moving just a few yards. The mountain was squeezing with about 25,000 pounds per square foot of pressure, crushing supports faster than crews could install them. Standard drill and blast was not working. At peak construction, 1,140 workers ran 3 shifts around the clock 6 days a week. Nearly 6,000 people cycled through over 5 years, putting in 4.9 million man-hours. 7 workers were killed during construction, 3 in the first bore and 4 in the second. The first contractor could not figure out how to get through the shear zone and went bankrupt trying. The question was not just how to drill through moving rock. The question was whether it was even possible. The solution came down to rethinking the entire approach. Instead of trying to dig the full tunnel in one shot, engineers developed what they called the multiple drift method. Here's how it worked. Crews carved 13 small tunnels in a ring around the perimeter of where the final tunnel would be, each one only 6 to 8 feet tall. As soon as they finished each small section, they lined it with concrete and steel. This created a reinforced shell that held the mountain back. Only after that shell was complete could they safely excavate the center. It was slower and more expensive, but it worked. They were essentially building the cage before the mountain could collapse it. The scale of material was massive. 190,000 cubic yards of concrete went in. 10,000 tons of reinforcing steel bars and 23,000 tons of structural steel held it all together. After 5 years of grinding forward, the Eisenhower Tunnel opened on March 8, 1973. It immediately became the highest point on the interstate system, but one tunnel carrying traffic in both directions hit capacity fast. Construction on a second bore, the Johnson Tunnel, started in August 1975. This time, engineers knew exactly what they were up against. They had mapped the geology, refined the techniques, and learned from 5 years of mistakes. The second tunnel opened on December 21, 1979, giving Interstate 70 a full 4-lane link under the Continental Divide. The price tag was staggering. The first bore was estimated at $42 million, but actually cost $108 million, about $765 million in today's money. The second bore added another $102.8 million, equivalent to $445 million today. All in, the project cost nearly $1.5 billion in modern dollars, with the federal government covering 90% and Colorado paying the rest. It was the most expensive federally aided highway project at the time. When the Eisenhower Tunnel opened on March 8, 1973, it did more than save time on a mountain crossing. It changed how Colorado worked. The drive from Denver to Vail dropped from over 3 hours to 2.5. Towns on the western slope that used to feel cut off from Denver were suddenly close enough for a day trip. Ski resorts that could only operate part-time became year-round destinations. Freight that used to get stuck for days in winter storms could move reliably. The state's economy started growing in ways it could not before. The engineers who argued that the time savings and year-round reliability would pay for the tunnel turned out to be right. Today, more than 35,000 vehicles pass through each day on average, spiking to 50,000 during summer and holiday weekends. Over 434 million vehicles have made the crossing since it opened. That's not California grapevine traffic, which tops 100,000 vehicles a day, but for a route through the highest point on the interstate system, it shows just how vital this link became. The Eisenhower and Johnson tunnels remain the highest point on the interstate system, but their elevation is just part of what they represent. The interstate network was not all flat prairie and easy grades. Some sections had to be engineered foot by foot through terrain that actively fought back. Sometimes the only way forward was straight through. For all the difficulty of building them and all the work it takes to maintain them, these tunnels proved something. When geography blocks the path, American engineering finds a way, even if that way runs through the heart of a mountain that tried to crush it. If you enjoyed learning about how American engineers conquered the Continental Divide, make sure to subscribe for Megabuild stories. What do you think? Knowing what it cost in money, time, and lives, was punching straight through the Continental Divide worth it? Let us know in the comments below.